Hello, my name is Glenn Andreiev. I'm a filmmaker and film historian, and today we're going to be talking about Marilyn Monroe. Now, you think about the actresses from the 30s, 40s, 50s, such as Bette Davis, Rita Hayworth, Lana Turner, Judy Garland. We remember them, but we don't remember them as well as Marilyn Monroe. Her image is everywhere. Critic Molly Haskell said she was the embodiment of the 1950s lie, that a woman had no needs, that her only job was to fulfill the needs of men. And Groucho Marx chimed in. He said, well, Marilyn Monroe, she's Mae West, Theda Bara, and Little Bo Peep rolled into one. Her real name was Norma Jean Mortensen, and she was born in Los Angeles on June 1st, 1926. There's some speculation as to who her real father is. Her mother really didn't have the finances to raise a child, so Marilyn grew up with foster parents. And it's in an interview that she had with Life magazine in 1962, where she talked about her childhood. In the interview, she says, some of my foster parents would take me to the movies.
Horsey hangout, swang show shops.
There it is, that's the world I want, up on the screen, so big. In June of 1942, when she's just turned 16 years old, she marries the next-door neighbor's son, 21-year-old James Daugherty. And he's working in a factory, and this is the start of World War II for the United States. And a lot of women are working in munitions factory, and Marilyn gets a job in a munitions factory. This is not really going too well with her husband, who wants her to be at home and be a housewife. He's first stationed at Catalina Island, and then he's shipped off to the Pacific to fight in the war. And it's a couple years later, and she's working at the factory, and photographer David Conover comes in. He's there to shoot morale-boosting pictures, of the girls at work, and one of his subjects is Marilyn Monroe. And she's now figuring this is the career I should follow, a model. And her husband, James Daugherty, is not liking this. He'd rather her be at home, be a housewife, work in the kitchen. She divorces Daugherty. She's already appeared on like 33 magazine covers. The camera absolutely loves her. She goes to 20th Century Fox to get a screen test, and there's executives there at Fox looking to build up her career, and one of the executives is Ben Lyon. Now, Ben Lyon started out as a male matinee idol in the late 1920s, early 1930s. He worked with Jean Harlow. In fact, it's kind of interesting. He was working on Hell's Angels for director Howard Hughes, and he recommended to Howard Hughes this newcomer, Jean Harlow. So Ben Lyon, he's kind of started the career of Jean Harlow and Marilyn Monroe. Both Marilyn and Ben Lyon are not really too thrilled with that name, Norma Jean Mortensen. So they decide on a new name. He thinks about Marilyn Miller, the Broadway star from the 1920s. And they look at Norma Jean's mother's maiden name, Monroe, and they put the two together. One of her first appearances is way in the distance in a crowd scene in a comedy about mules called Scuba Hoo, Scuba Hey, released in 1948. She does land a talking role opposite Groucho Marx in what many Marx Brothers fans consider the real last film of the Marx Brothers, Love Happy.
Is there anything I can do for you? What a ridiculous statement.
Mr. Grunion, I want you to help me.
I have a little sand left. What seems to be the trouble?
Some men are following me.
Really? I can't understand why.
1950 is the year that really takes off for Marilyn Monroe. She appears in John Huston's masterful crime thriller, The Asphalt Jungle. She plays the mistress for troubled lawyer Louis Calhern. And then at 20th Century Fox, she's in the film that would earn the Best Picture Oscar that year, All About Eve. She's got a little small part there. She's getting a lot of fan mail, and the Army newspaper Stars and Stripes during the Korean War is calling her Miss Cheesecake of 1951. Now, there's a lot of buzz about her romantic involvement with retiring baseball giant Joe DiMaggio. She's taking acting more seriously. She winds up in Fritz Lang's 1952 noir, Clash by Night, where she plays a girl working in a fish factory. And to prepare for the role, she actually worked in a fish factory for a while. Then there's Don't Bother to Knock, a terrific thriller with one of the most talented actors in film history, Richard Widmark, where she plays a psychotic babysitter. The Hollywood Reporter is saying she deserves real starring roles. Now, one of her best films from this period is Monkey Business, directed by the great Howard Hawks and co-starring Cary Grant. 1953, her career would really skyrocket with two films. The musical Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, directed by Howard Hawks, and co-starring Jane Russell. Now then, there's the creepy, suspenseful film noir classic in Technicolor, Niagara. Now, this trailer is going to be in black and white, but...
It's Marilyn Monroe skyrocketing to new dramatic heights. When a man took her loveliness in his arms, he took his life in his hands. Joseph Cotton, helpless in her siren spell. Jean Peters, caught in the destructive whirlpool of another's deceit.
Hello, please.
Now, audiences were really engrossed by Niagara. It's a tense, suspenseful film where the unexpected happens. A lot of groups did not like the sexuality of the film, the fact that there's a lot of implied nudity with Marilyn Monroe. Another rising talent at 20th Century Fox is the great director Samuel Fuller. Fuller would make these very brutal, very honest films, such as a war film like The Steel Helmet, or the newspaper melodrama Park Row. And he's preparing a film called Pickup on South Street, a really terrific film noir that centers around a woman who's like a transporter for secret documents for these people working for the communists. And Marilyn Monroe really wanted that part that was played amazingly by Jean Peters. But Fuller said, no, this is going to be a comedy if you do it. So they remained really good friends, and Fuller remembered that she'd be at the 20th Century Fox commissary, like in a big sweater, and being an avid reader, her nose would be in like a book by Dostoevsky. Her and Joe DiMaggio would marry in 1954, but there was conflicts with her and 20th Century Fox. Two of her gripes was that she was not being paid as much as some of the other talent there at Fox, even though she's like the number one attraction at Fox, and that she could not choose her own projects. She's kind of getting tired of these sex kitten roles. River of No Return. It's an exciting movie. It's her and Robert Mitchum, directed by Otto Preminger. But she said it's a Z-cowboy movie in which the acting takes a backseat to the scenery and the cinemascope process. But it was a big hit. Some years ago, I was watching River of No Return with a couple of friends. One of them is a guitarist. And the scene where Marilyn is playing the guitar, he's looking at the screen very closely and he's saying that she's really playing the guitar. She's not faking it. And our next film is done with the great director-writer Billy Wilder, who's given us already such films as The Lost Weekend and Sunset Boulevard, Stalag 17. And in this film, she plays the neighbor to a married man who has these sort of like sexual fantasies about her. And one scene that they film on location in New York, he's walking with her and they walk over a subway grating and the subway underneath passes by, sending up a bunch of air, sending her dress flying up in the air. And when they filmed this, and they had like 2,000 spectators watching this, the subway grate image just becomes so iconic. I mean, it's everywhere. It managed to make an appearance in Pulp Fiction, and it's splattered all over newspapers across the world. And the one person who really doesn't like it is Joe DiMaggio. He doesn't like the attention that his wife is getting. And it's not one of the happiest marriages, and it soon winds up in divorce. Marilyn Monroe would return to New York, not to stand on subway gratings anymore, but to form her own production company, Marilyn Monroe Productions. She's able to get a new contract with 20th Century Fox where she gets more money and the ability to choose her own projects and the ability to go off and make her own films at Marilyn Monroe Productions. Bus Stop is one of her best films at 20th Century Fox.
No one but Marilyn could do justice to Bus Stop.
She plays a saloon singer, Sherry, and she decided that she doesn't want it to be like your typical Western where the saloon singer comes out and she's, absolutely pitch perfect in her singing and dancing. That Monroe wanted her singing and dancing to be faulty, like a real saloon singer. She's being really problematic on the set, clashing with director Joshua Logan. She's trying to make cinematography choices. However, Bus Stop is released and it's a critical and financial success. Right after Bus Stop is released, Marilyn Monroe marries acclaimed writer Arthur Miller. Variety's headline was Egghead Weds Hourglass. The first real production under Marilyn Monroe Productions was the really touching, really sweet The Prince and the Showgirl, which was filmed in England, and her co-star, her co-producer and director was the great Laurence Olivier. She would clash often with Olivier on the production. A lot of this was fueled by her addiction to prescription medicine. The film is not a hit, and she takes a break to get her life back together with her husband, Arthur Miller. But then she returns to Some Like It Hot. It's one of the funniest movies you'll ever see. If you haven't seen Some Like It Hot, do see it.
Since the Marx Brothers, so much comedy. Not since the 7-year itch, so much Marilyn. The best picture this year will also be the funniest.
Good night, sugar. Good night, honey.
However, the production wasn't all that funny, by Monroe demanding a lot of retakes and clashing with director Billy Wilder, who was also pretty much a perfectionist, but he was going in a different direction than Monroe. A lot of times on the set, everybody's waiting for her to come out of her trailer, and she would not come out of her trailer. For like the scene where they're on the train set, they're all waiting for her to come out of the trailer. So what happens is director Billy Wilder decides to do something of a prank and something to get the production going. And he has one of the actresses that are waiting there come up and sing the song that Marilyn Monroe is supposed to sing. Now, Marilyn hears this from the dressing room, and she comes storming out. She says, okay, let's start filming. Some Like It Hot is released in the spring of 1959, and it's a critical and financial success. It puts Marilyn Monroe, Tony Curtis, Jack Lemmon, Billy Wilder at the top tier. And many critics to this day feel that in 1959, Ben-Hur should not have been the film that just swept the Academy Awards. It should have been Some Like It Hot, that everybody involved should have taken home an award.
Hold it! Here comes the girl who put into movies. Marilyn Monroe.
Next year comes the musical comedy Let's Make Love, where she plays opposite Yves Montand. She chooses her director, the longtime popular George Cukor, who's been working since the early 1930s. He's the one who brings together Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy in so many films, directed The Philadelphia Story. Her husband, Arthur Miller, contributed to the screenplay. Let's Make Love is a fun film. Wasn't Some Like It Hot. There's talk that Truman Capote wanted Marilyn Monroe to play the lead in the adaptation of his story, Breakfast at Tiffany's. For her next film, The Misfits, she would team with one of her first directors, John Huston, and she'd be playing opposite Clark Gable and Montgomery Clift. The Misfits is a very serious, very compelling film about two misfits, Clark Gable and Marilyn Monroe, who starred a romance.
Yeah, you're darn right I worked hard. I never worked like that for anybody. And I didn't do it for some bug-eyed rabbit.
Okay, please.
Honey, will you go on inside now and stop being silly?
I'm not being silly.
During production, Marilyn Monroe was hospitalized for gallstones. And if you look at Clark Gable in the film, he does not look well. A lot in The Misfits just really grab at you. Like, look at this scene where Clark Gable is mishandling this horse and the way Marilyn reacts. It's one of the most realistic films of the early 1960s. It's early 1962, and Marilyn's going to star in a new film, again directed by George Cukor, called Something's Got to Give. Now, this film was never completed. If you want to get an idea what the film would be like, look at the 1940 film with Cary Grant, My Favorite Wife. Something's Got to Give is a remake of that film. Her co-stars would be Dean Martin and Sid Charisse. And again, her medical problems and addiction problems delayed filming. It's being made at 20th Century Fox, and they're having trouble with another film that has delays because of the star's medical conditions, Elizabeth Taylor and Cleopatra. So eventually, Something Got to Give is halted. She resumed filming Something's Got to Give with 20th Century Fox, only after they've blasted her in the press as being mentally ill and that they're going to replace her with Lee Remick. Her co-star Dean Martin said, no, I'm only going to do the film with Marilyn Monroe. And they just started filming a little bit more of the film. On the morning of August 5th, 1962, her maid awoke and tried to get into Marilyn's bedroom and would find that she had died. The world goes into shock. Empty medicine bottles are all around her body. Her autopsy showed that she had several times the lethal doses of drugs in her body. Her last completed film was The Misfits, which was also the last completed film of Clark Gable, who would shortly afterwards pass from a heart attack. And it's rather discomforting to know that 24 years earlier, in 1937, Gable was in the last film of Jean Harlow, Saratoga. Why does Marilyn Monroe have such a legacy? You think about the other blonde bombshells from the 1950s, such as Jane Mansfield, Mamie Van Doren, Diana Dors, Anita Ekberg. We don't put them on such a high pedestal as we do Marilyn Monroe. Jane Mansfield starts with some really great films, such as The Girl Can't Help It. Look at her co-stars in the film. And Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter? Really funny film, both brilliantly directed by Frank Tashlin. But within a few years, Jane Mansfield was not really looking for quality work. She was just looking for a paycheck. She's in such like exploitive films as Primitive Love. Primitive Love is like a really piggy film that sort of champions being a peeping Tom. Mamie Van Doren would work a lot with exploitive producer Albert Zugsmith, who just wanted to put out films in a hurry, just make them very exploitive. Such films as Sex Kittens Go to College, or High School Confidential, or the really crazy Beat Generation, which, if that film ever shows up, you have to see it. Then you have Anita Ekberg, who started in Hollywood, but then she moved over to Italy and did a lot of films with Federico Fellini that really just catered to the art house crowd. These are great films such as La Dolce Vita and the really wild Boccaccio 70. But Marilyn Monroe, she wisely decided she's going to be around the best. The best publicity men, the best screenwriters, the best directors. You just go down her career. She just wouldn't take a paycheck to be in a film like Castle of Terror or something like that. She just wanted to be in the best. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why she's going to be in the films that are going to really hold up, that can be viewed 20 years afterwards, 50 years afterwards, 100 years afterwards. So, my name's Glenn Andreiev. Thanks for being here, and have a good day.